Okay, so this is a little quickie tutorial to show you how to get the glow effect to work in Unity. So let's jump right into it. So the first thing that you'll need to do is install the post-processing stack within Unity. And the way you do that is just come over here to your package manager. If you can't see the package manager, you can find that right up here in your window menu. And then just look down here, you'll see post-processing. You can also do a search for it over here in the search box. Select it and then hit install, and it will install this into your project. Next thing that you'll want to do is get it working. So let's start out by first creating, let's make a couple of 3D objects. I'll make a cube here. And let me make a ground plane of some sort. We'll make it nice and big. Okay, let's take another cube here. Let's duplicate the cube, move it over. Really makes no difference. This is just for play. All right, so there's a couple of cubes. 3 cubes. Next thing that we'll want to do is let's create an empty game object, and let's call this our give it a name. Let's call it our post-processing volume. Let's give it that name, PPVolume. We'll come up to this and we'll say we're going to add a volume component. So type in here post, and you'll see that filters the menus down to something more manageable, and select post-processing volume. All right, so now we have a volume associated with this object. Now I'll come back and look at this in just a second, but in general, just to start with, we'll just turn on that it's global. That will mean that the volume will affect the entire game scene and not just the bounds that are determined by some volume amount that we apply to this game object. All right, so for now, let's just jump over here. Let's go over to our camera. Here's our default camera. And let's make ourselves a new layer on the camera. And we'll call it PP layer. How about that? Let's make it more clear. Post processing. Okay, so now we have ourselves a new layer for our camera. Let's put our camera on that layer. Let's come to add component over here, and we'll select add component, and the same thing will, we can filter based on this post processing term, and let's select layer. And so we're going to add a post-processing layer to our camera. It automatically will assign the camera as the triggering source. You can change that if you want to, but for our purposes for getting started, that should be fine. The layer that we want to be dealing with here is that layer that we just created called post-processing. And that should pretty much handle what we've got to do for this, I believe. Let's come back over to our post-processing volume, and let's create what's called a profile, a post-processing profile. We can either click on the new button and it'll create it for us automatically, or if you want to, you can come over here into your scene and go create and select post-processing profile. And so we'll do that. We'll just go that technique. We'll call it our bloom profile. And we'll see that over here in the inspector, it creates this kind of generic bloom profile. And we'll want to add the bloom effect to the bloom profile. So add effect, Unity, and bloom, and bloom. Okay. All right, so now we have a bloom profile with a bloom effect added to it. We can adjust the intensity here. We'll give it just a little bit of intensity. We need to give it some diffusion, which kind of spreads it out. And let's give it a color of some sort. Let's go, well, actually, don't worry about that for now. Let's turn on fast mode, and then make sure that we check this little box right here beside fast mode. So intensity, diffusion, and fast mode, all on our bloom effect, our bloom profile. Let's go back to our bloom volume, and now we can hit the little target button right here and select our bloom profile, and that will add that to our post-processing volume. You can have multiple post-processing volumes if you want for all different types of effects. You may want to have a depth of field effect. You may want to have, there's a whole selection of effects. All right, so that should take care of that. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that our post-processing volume is on that post-processing layer. Okay, very critical. Make sure that you put your volume on the post-processing layer. Okay. All right. The last thing that we want to do then is come over here and create some materials. Let's create ourselves a glow material. We'll just call it glow mat. We'll come over here in our inspector, and we need to turn on emission, and then here is where we can select some sort of emission color that we might like. I'll give it that color right there. All right, that should pretty much take care of that. Next thing we want to do is just drag our materials and drop them onto our volumes, our objects here. So we'll take our glow mat, put it on this one, glow material, put it on this one, and glow material, put it on this one. And so now we have ourselves glow materials, we have a post-processing volume, and we have an intensity. Let's double check our main camera here. Hit S, post-processing, material. We're on the layer. Okay. Okay, so we have our post-processing volume set up. We have our bloom effect added to the post-processing volume component that we've added to an empty GameObject. And we have our cubes set up. They all have a glow material that's been added to them. And we have our camera that is set up with our post-process layer. The camera is residing on the post-process layer, and we've selected that as the layer for the volume blending to occur. And so you would think that we would have some glow, right? We have to make sure that our post-process volume is on the post-processing layer, and that gets us one step closer. Everything should be configured properly at this point, but the issue that the reason we're not seeing any glow here is because we need to go into our material, and we need to, under emission right now, under emission, we need to click on our HDR slider, and we need to set an intensity, the intensity of the glow. Right now, by default, it's set on 0. So if we set it on 2, something like that, you can see we begin to get some sort of a glow effect happening. Let's say we put it on 2.7. We like that. All right. So now we have ourselves a glow. And we can come back now to our volume into our bloom effect, and we can tune this now with this this little slider here, depending on what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, so hopefully that helps get you all sorted on how to do a basic glow effect on an object of some sort. Okey-doke.